It all started on a red-eye flight from Seattle to New York. I'd booked the cheapest ticket I could find, which meant I was seated near the back, right by the bathrooms. It wasn't ideal, but it was just an overnight flight. How bad could it be? I remember the moment I boarded, something felt off. It wasn't just the tired, harried expressions of the passengers or the two bright fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over everything. It was the atmosphere itself. The air was thick, almost oppressive, like a storm was brewing just above the plane. I shook it off, dismissing it as pre-flight anxiety. I hadn't flown in years and figured it was just nerves. I took my seat and settled in, tucking my bag under the chair in front of me. The plane was half empty, which I initially thought was a stroke of luck. No one next to me, meaning I could spread out and maybe even catch some sleep. But as we taxied down the runway, I noticed something odd. The flight attendants looked tense, more so than I'd ever seen on a flight. They exchanged glances, muttering to each other under their breath. It wasn't just pre-flight jitters, they were visibly unnerved. I pushed that thought aside, deciding not to obsess over their behavior. We took off without issue, the city lights fading below as the plane ascended into the inky darkness. After the seatbelt sign turned off, I reclined my seat and closed my eyes, hoping for a few hours of sleep. But that sleep never came. About 30 minutes into the flight, the turbulence started. It wasn't the usual gentle rocking you sometimes feel on a plane. This was violent, sharp, as though something was slamming against the sides of the aircraft. The lights flickered, and overhead bins popped open. A few passengers gasped, but no one screamed. There was an eerie calm among the travelers, as if they were all in a collective daze. The turbulence continued for what felt like hours, though it must have been only minutes. And then, just as suddenly as it began, it stopped. I exhaled a breath I didn't realize I was holding and glanced out the window. The darkness outside was unnatural. Usually, you can see the soft glow of city lights far below, or at least the stars overhead. But there was nothing. Just an impenetrable void. It felt like we were suspended in a vast, endless blackness. As I was trying to make sense of it, I heard a strange noise, soft at first, barely audible over the hum of the engines. It was coming from the back of the plane, near the bathrooms. It sounded like whispering. I turned around, craning my neck to see who was back there. The aisle was empty. No one was standing, no flight attendants in sight. But the whispering continued, growing louder, more insistent. It was a chorus of voices, speaking in a language I couldn't understand, harsh, guttural, and deeply unsettling. I thought about calling for a flight attendant, but something stopped me. The air felt heavy again, like it had when I first boarded. It pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. And then, the lights went out. Complete darkness engulfed the cabin. The engine hum was the only thing that assured me we were still in the air, but even that seemed to fade into the background. I heard movement, shuffling, footsteps, but no one else seemed to be reacting. No one was screaming or panicking. That's when I saw it, a faint glow from the back of the plane. It wasn't the usual sterile light from the lavatories. This was different, colder, almost blue. My heart raced as I squinted to get a better look. Something was moving in that light, a silhouette, tall and unnaturally thin. It stepped into the aisle, slowly making its way toward the front of the plane. The figure was human-shaped but wrong. Its limbs were too long, its posture bent and contorted. As it moved, its head tilted from side to side, as though it were studying the passengers. I froze, too terrified to move. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening now, and I could swear the figure was speaking to me, directly into my mind. Words I couldn't comprehend, but that filled me with an overwhelming sense of dread. Suddenly, the lights flickered back on, and the figure vanished. Everything looked normal again. The passengers were quiet, some even sleeping, as though nothing had happened. I wanted to scream, to ask if anyone else had seen it, but I was paralyzed with fear. I pressed myself into my seat, hoping the flight would just end soon, that I could get off this cursed plane and forget this ever happened. But it didn't stop. About an hour later, the whispers returned, this time louder, more frantic. The plane shook violently again, but it wasn't turbulence this time. It felt deliberate, as though something was outside, grabbing the plane, shaking it.
I looked out the window, desperate to see something, anything that made sense, and that's when I saw the hand. A massive, elongated hand, gripping the wing. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, and the fingers were impossibly long, stretching across the metal like talons. My mind couldn't process it. There was no way something like that could exist. I blinked, convinced I was hallucinating, but when I looked again, the hand was still there, clawing at the wing as if trying to tear it apart. I grabbed the armrests, my knuckles turning white, and tried to scream, but the sound wouldn't come out. I could barely move. My body felt like it was being held down by an invisible force. And then, just as suddenly, the hand disappeared and the plane leveled out. The whispers faded, replaced by the low hum of the engines. I glanced around, heart pounding, and noticed the flight attendants had returned to their duties as if nothing had happened. They moved up and down the aisles, checking on passengers, handing out drinks, and ignoring the terror that had just unfolded. I managed to catch the eye of one of the attendants, a young woman with a forced smile plastered on her face. I motioned for her to come over. "Did you see that?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "Out there, on the wing, something was grabbing it." Her smile faltered for a split second before she quickly regained her composure. "Sir, you've had a long night. It's probably just the stress of flying. Try to relax, okay?" "No, I'm serious. Something's out there." I was practically shouting now, but no one around me seemed to react. It was as though they couldn't hear me. The flight attendant leaned in closer, her smile now gone. "Sir, I suggest you sit back and stay calm. We don't want any incidents." Her words sent a chill down my spine. There was something off about her tone, something cold and detached. She stood up straight and walked away without another word. I slumped back into my seat, unsure of what to do. I couldn't leave. I couldn't fight whatever was happening. I just had to endure it. The rest of the flight was a blur of terror. The whispers never stopped, and I saw more shapes moving in the darkness outside the plane. Figures that seemed to swim through the air like shadows, circling the plane, watching, waiting. At one point, I saw another passenger, an older man across the aisle, begin to twitch and convulse. His eyes rolled back into his head, and his body jerked violently. No one else noticed. No one even looked in his direction. I wanted to get up, to help him, but my legs wouldn't move. It was like I was glued to my seat. The man's convulsions grew more violent, and then, just as suddenly as they had started, they stopped. He slumped over, lifeless, his eyes wide open and staring straight ahead. The flight attendants didn't react. No one did. And then, just when I thought I couldn't take any more, the pilot's voice crackled over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're beginning our descent into New York. Please fasten your seatbelts." I couldn't believe it. Somehow, we were still in the air, still flying toward our destination. But I wasn't relieved. Not yet. The whispers were still there, faint but persistent, like a nagging voice in the back of my mind. As we descended, the darkness outside began to lift, revealing the faint glow of city lights far below. For the first time in hours, I felt a glimmer of hope. The plane touched down with a jolt, and the engines roared as we taxied to the gate. I sat frozen in my seat, waiting for the nightmare to end. When the seatbelt sign finally dimmed off, I grabbed my bag and bolted for the exit. I didn't wait for the other passengers, didn't care about decorum. I just needed to get off that plane. As I stepped into the terminal, I took a deep breath of the stale airport air. It felt like freedom, like I had narrowly escaped something terrible. But as I walked toward the baggage claim, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't really free. The whispers were still there, faint but unmistakable, lurking just beneath the surface. I've taken a few more flights since then, but I never feel safe. Every time I board a plane, I hear them again. The whispers, the growls, the shadows, and